Good evening. You're listening to the Xtreme Movie Show. Tonight's episode, Xtreme TV, Season 2, Episode 3, Twin Peaks, the ABC masterpiece by Mark Frost and Dave Lynch. I'm your host, Rob. With me tonight is Professor Pixel. We're continuing week to week our review on the show that we're rewatching. In my case, for the first time, I've not seen it in 30 years, for the very first time for Professor Pixel. So I will turn it over to you first, Pixel. Season 2, Episode 3, Twin Peaks. This is the long normal season, way back in 1990, in the fall when this came out. A couple episodes in now. What's your take on this episode?
Well, my initial take is that I feel like we do get some more progress here. In some ways, this one does drag a little because we have to deal with personal drama, but that's really towards the end. But there's a little more weirdness in this one too, mostly in Dale's explanation of the giant, but that's not how our show starts. Our show actually starts with the nurses and doctors putting a hysterical Ronette in a bed and sedating her. And Dale enters the scene and takes her hand and takes the tweezers that he has, and he pulls out a letter from her finger. It's revealed that the IV seemed to be tampered with.
Yes.
And that's when Dale decides to mention to Albert and Harry that he has seen a giant.
Yeah, I think when he does, it's like you can tell Albert almost is kind of like just putting up with it. And of course, like I've said, Albert's the guy that gets the wisecracks and that is like what we would say, oh, this is kind of ridiculous. And it's funny because he has a few good ones in here. And this is almost Albert's episode in a way where when you sum up everything that Albert says or is involved in, definitely more screen time. We've seen this before with Cooper. We know that he's seeing them, whether or not they're real or not in their reality. It appears to be, because as much as you said about the plot moving forward here, we get a lot more screen time with Ronette, even though she doesn't really say anything. She's in there. It starts off dark. That's the immediate thing that jumped out to me. We talked about last episode how it seems to either start off dark or maybe goofy or something else. And off the pain of that dumb love song, from last episode, we start off darker. And I'm like, okay, this is a nice turn here too. Because the one thing that picked up for me would be in the next scene where Donna, she goes and she visits Mr. Smith, the neighbor of the older lady from the Meals on Wheels program, who suggested she should go next door. She'd left him a little note, and he had called, and so now she's showing up. And of course, her little love triangle situation with Maddie and James is pivoting, I think would be the right word to say here too. So I think she absolutely has no problems going to see the stranger, who seems to be he's not an ugly guy. He's not a man's man, but he's certainly not effeminate, but he seems like a soft, sincere person who happens to grow orchids and has a phobia of stepping out of his house, and we know nothing about him. But she sits down in there and they're talking, and kind of goes to a certain place, and you're like, oh, it seems like Donna's vibing on this guy. Donna just wants to be loved. So, yeah. I mean, and James isn't going to do it. And even though she pretty much forced herself on him last episode, and here it's this nice slow pitch, and it's about how they were friends or whatever. And he basically says, hey, I would like you to put this plant for her. We were friends. She's like to consider me like her special friend and everything. So I thought this scene was neat. It was an interesting way to slowly introduce another character. You saw him peeking through the window blinds last week, and then now here you're that. But we're going to see a little bit more of this new character or characters' arcs progressing a little bit. And Donna, who was kind of boring and plain, like I've said, I'm starting to get interested in this little detective thing. So in 2-3 episodes, all of a sudden, Donna's got my interest now, whereas most of last season, I didn't really care. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree, because this is exactly the turn we expected her to make last season after she talked to Audrey, but she didn't. They took their time, and now they're bringing that into here. I was surprised that Mr. Smith was young, because I mean, he's a part of the Meals on Wheels program, apparently.
Right.
And he's next door to this creepy old lady and her creepy grandson. But there's a little bit in here that I noticed whenever the guy is asking Donna to take the orchid because he has a special hybrid just for Laura. He leaves the room a minute, and Donna, she notices a piece of paper sticking out of the thing. And I notice her go over it there, but we see her shuffle it around. I never saw her actually take it because the guy then just peeks in and then makes his way in and offers it to her. And you're absolutely right about them vibing, because right then, I believe she says, I'll be back.
Yeah, and I think when she said it, I did not get the vibe of, oh, I'm just being nice to you and all that stuff where, girls try not to hurt a man's feelings or like we would normally think, especially when you're talking about a younger person, say 18, 19, 20 years old. Because he seems like he's early mid-20s maybe, and he's definitely no older than 30, at least the way he appears. So it's definitely not out of the realm that that Laura and Mr. Smith can be. Harold, I hate to say that name, Harold, but it is what it is. Harold Smith. Can you be more plain Jane than that? I don't know the significance of Harold, so I call him Mr. Smith. But yeah, it seemed like she was relieved to say it, like, yeah, I'll be back. I already knew I was going to come back and see you. It's like she did it, and I thought, oh. And he seemed like, okay, that's really, really cool, because he was a bit nervous and all that too, but he was very social with her. He sat across from her on the little couch there. He didn't do anything creepy or sexual in nature and all that too. But yeah, I got the vibe that she was more interested in him rather than he was in her, but just because he talked a little bit about Laura and all that too. So I'm going, I wonder, is this going to be like, the nice guy James kind of thing or something? I don't know. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that.
So this next scene is it's kind of the most disturbing scene in this entire episode. And it's not because of how it starts. They start off with some information being given. RBT are the letters that were found in the girl's nails in each victim. But then Harry asks Dale about the giant, and I think this is when Albert gets his little quip saying, "Is he in any way related to the dwarf?"
Yeah, making the Pinocchio reference. Yeah, he always has these little comebacks that are pretty good.
He goes on to say that the letter found underneath the nail is apparently from an issue of Flesh World.
Yes.
They also know the gun that Dale was shot with. And as he's about to go back to the lab, he throws one final jab at Harry, and Harry grabs him by the collar of his shirt, and he's trying to give a message. Stop your bullshit, honestly.
Yeah.
But Albert then goes on.
Oh, this is great. Yeah, go ahead.
You think it's great. I find it incredibly disturbing as he's just going on about where he stands in life and how it all leads to love. And he looks at Truman and says, "I love you, Sheriff Truman." And then Sheriff Truman lets go of his shirt, and Albert just leaves. And I just couldn't believe this scene. It didn't feel real.
Well, that's the whole point, is that, like I've said before, this is a tough dance between like dark stuff, supernatural stuff, and then, romantic drama. I mean, that's why I consider this a soap opera. And to me, I could argue that this scene with Albert, the way he is because he's intense and they're ready to go at it, and he just takes it to another level. I could argue that it kind of takes the air out of the balloon when it comes to what they were just discussing, because immediately I thought of the rock throwing scene from season one. I thought, well, obviously this doesn't even compare or come close, but I like how there's a couple of people now. You got Albert as a member of the crew trying to help out, because we haven't seen too much of Andy or Hawk yet. So this two, maybe three people is really the core of trying to figure out what's going on. And Albert is very sharp. He's very good, and he is a bit different, which I do like too. But the fact that he totally amps up and is totally, I do everything I do out of love, and I love you, and it's like, it's believable. It's just such a great delivery. It's not stupid. It seems kind of silly, but then he kind of like straightens his shirt out and everything too. I will argue that I could also say that instead of taking the air out of the balloon in this scene, because they're talking about dark, deep stuff, that it makes you go, now I understand why him and Cooper seem to have a pretty strong relationship, because Cooper obviously is very open with the people that he's working with about his spirituality and what he does, discussing dreams, even if they think he's a little bit off. So I can see where, even though Albert might think it's silly, he understands it and goes with it. So to see him open up like this, you're like, okay, I can see how these two have a good working relationship, and how Cooper even looks after him. So to me, that's a clear sign that you're going to have Albert be a much bigger factor now that we see him. He's just not going to be there for a comedy relief. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I do get what you're saying. It's funny you bring up Deputy Andy today, because he doesn't make an appearance. It seems that he took off because Lucy has a date after Dale goes out into the main area of the sheriff's department, talks to James a minute, saying, "Come to me with information. That way you don't end up in trouble." And then he goes away, and Hawk goes up to Lucy. We see this guy. He kind of reminds me of Leland. I don't know what it is. I think mostly the hairstyle and sometimes that dumb grin.
I think it's that pseudo houndstooth suit selection, really. But this guy's, well, go ahead. I don't know what to make of this guy. I'm not hating on him yet, but I'm very close to it.
As he goes over, Lucy says, "Hi, Dick." And he's like, "So are you ready? Let's go." And he's trying to keep on this joyful.
We'll go Dutch.
As he's there,
he said, "We'll do Dutch," because he's a cheap bastard.
Yeah, he is thankfully not there long, because we switch back to Harry and then Hawk, and then
yes,
sorry, all these names. And this episode is big because I think we get a lot of characters introduced in this one.
Yes.
Leland goes to the sheriff.
Palmer. Yeah.
Yes, I know who Leland is.
Okay.
He goes up to the sheriff, and they all stop as Leland starts explaining, "I know this man. He's holding up the poster. Bob is in there. Long hair Bob, not Bobby." And Leland starts going on, saying about how, "I knew him when I was a little boy at my grandfather's cabin." The same thing he said to, what are their names? Ben and Jerry last episode.
Right.
And they're trying to pull more information because this is the only lead they've had on this man. And they ask for a name. Dale specifically asks for a name, and Leland tries to think of it. And he knows it wasn't the high society neighbors that they had on their right side, but this guy that lived on a lot in this small white house named Robertson, he believes, and RBT just seems to fit. The last thing, and this is the most interesting thing, Leland mentions that the man used to flick matches at him and ask, "Do you want to play with fire, little boy?" And after that, Dale knows they have their man. The reason why that specific line is so interesting is because we know that James used to have Laura say that to him. I can't remember which episode he revealed that in.
Right.
And he used didn't she actually say Bob whenever James was explaining?
I believe that was when they were playing the tape. Maddie and James gang were all around at the kitchen counter and they were playing it. And that was when he felt like a fool. This guy really spins me up. It was around then. So it was the end of season 1, I believe. But yeah, we're seeing certain phrases or themes that lead us to stuff, because there's a comment that Cooper had made in here about how Bob's likeness has been, run through the databases, the FBI, the DA, everything. 0 blanks, nothing comes up. But he says, well, the only people who've seen him are 4 of us here in Twin Peaks. So it's kind of interesting that, okay, and you had pointed out last week on the episode about how there's this time thing where if Leland did see this guy as is when he was a child, how could he be like the same age now when it's 40 years, let's say, in the future, and that's kind of interesting, because the thing about Leland too is, he's obviously went through his grief stages, and we talked about how he seemed a little delirious and singing and dancing, all sorts of stuff. And we kind of like, yeah, all right, he's going through a lot. But one thing I really think about this actor here is he describes it, is he is so sincere, does such a great job of just saying to him, no, I really do think I know him. His delivery is phenomenal. You're believing what he's saying. So Hawk's going to go check it out or whatever, but it's a neat little scene there too. We haven't really picked out necessarily a lot so far in the past few episodes. Interesting looking scenes, but what I liked here at the end too is when he says, do you want to play fire with me, little boy? He's taking out the old matchbook, and he kind of flicks one off his finger, and then you see the camera cuts, and you see a match that's lit go into a little cigarette thing there too, and you see Cooper pick it up. He takes the flaming match and he blows out and he goes, "That's our man." I'm like, that's a cool little scene. I'm thinking how they would have filmed it, how many takes would it have taken, but it's just one of those little neat little catchy scenes. I think okay, that's kind of cool. It's a much better scene than the next one, because it's a continuation of the Lucy love triangle, where her and Mr. Tremaine, who does the custom menswear at the department store, which I went, wait a minute. Based on what we've seen a lot of good-looking people and turn out to be really despicable human beings or have done something really bad, even though we might understand why. And we've seen some people that have done bad things that we almost understand why. I'm going, is he going to be involved more or not? Or my instinct just says, oh, he's just going to be part of to give Lucy something to do and Andy. But they're sitting down at the counter at the Double R, and he's just rambling on because she's just totally not interested in stuff. But of course, we know that Lucy's pregnant. She mentions it here to him and all that. She gets upset because the way she describes it, she goes, "Oh, you hadn't called me in 6 weeks, and we've gone out for 3 months, and yeah, we had a great time one night, ended up at a really funny place, and you go, well, Lucy wants to be loved too. But I'm looking at this going, I remember Lucy being the one that was just not an airhead, but just kind of like patient, and everybody was, appreciated her doing the donut spread and everything here. But now I'm going, what the hell, Lucy? You're fooling around on, Deputy Dumbass, as you like to call him, with this clown who's just an imbecile. I could totally understand this guy just going out with you, wanting to go Dutch because you just called him up out of the blue because you weren't seeing him anymore, and that you were just having a summer special going on. So I don't know. I don't hate Lucy, and I don't hate what she did. We don't know what's going on. So to me, I just kind of follow this way it is, and I don't really care right now. I just don't.
It's basically an annoying little side plot that just comes out of almost nowhere. Speaking of annoying side plots that seem totally unnecessary, we have James and Maddie in that stupid music from the
Just
song.
You, I think, yeah.
Episode plays in the background.
They're in the diner too. They just kind of like scroll down to the end of the diner. Yeah.
He's talking about Donna, saying that saying about how different she seems, and he goes on about saying how sometimes I feel like getting on my motorcycle and just driving away. Maddie says no and takes his hand.
He's complaining that she was getting all sexually aggressive with him and everything. Bro, what the hell do you want? You're singing to two chicks that, got the deer in the headlight look at you like, oh, they can't wait to bed you. Maybe all three at the same time. Because you should just grab both their hands and went upstairs last episodes, bro. Even with that crap song, chicks go crazy for that stuff. Or at least they used to. And it's like, I'm going, yeah. But then that's where I said, this is the pivot, because Donna comes into there because she's getting an update on what happened with Mr. Smith, and she sees that Maddie's got the hand on it, and of course, idiot James, kind of moves his hand, and it seems like he has absolutely no idea how this looks to her. He's got zero awareness of how things come across to other people. This guy's so clueless. He's functionally a moron, in my opinion. Maddie, I think, knows. I think Maddie knows she's interested in him. She's just waiting for James to tell her to do. She's super passive. So at least out of this group, Dawn is the only one doing stuff, because she just gets kind of pissy and says, well, maybe you could two sit there and hold hands and think about it, and just walks off. But there's no misunderstanding here what's going on too. In my opinion, Maddie's putting the moves on James, and Dawn's seeing what's going on, doesn't like it. And she saw last episode. She's like, screw you. I'm going to upgrade. I don't need no sad sack James who won't even do nothing. Even when I put the goods on him, I'm gonna go with this old man and see what the world's really like. That's how I'm taking it. Anyway,
it does have those vibes. But speaking of stressful situations like that, we finally get an update on Audrey.
Let me just say this, as you get ready to describe the scene. One thing that, again, I mentioned before here at the beginning of this episode is we started off dark. The end of the last episode, we get left on cliffhangers basically. Each episode leaves you wanting more. That's a tried and true method, always works. The last episode, we were left with Audrey in a really tight situation. So we have all these scenes up to now, halfway through the episode, before we even get to where we're at right now with Audrey.
Yeah. Yeah, they leave you wanting, and they make you work for the next step. And this situation does not look good, because Audrey's being tied up. Blackie's there. They're setting up a camera. And the boss from the department store is going, oh, this isn't good. This isn't good. And she says to basically trust her. They're going to make Ben pay if he wants his little girl back.
Yeah.
But first, she's going to do to Audrey what he did to Blackie. And that's when she pulls out the needle, and you instantly know where it's going to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to take your favorite person? Well, there's no log lady. Your favorite male person.
Well, the one-armed man, is at the station house, and he's talking about, and he's working on actually just selling shoes. But when he sees the picture of Bob on the table, he freaks out. And I don't know if some of these scenes should have been like played out longer rather than the way this is edited, where you only get this for a second where he goes in the bathroom, and then we cut back to it, because it's an intense scene, but we don't get to see yet because it gets cut in with Cooper and Harry talking to Shelley. And this is the scene I've been waiting for with Shelley, because Shelley and Bobby are planning on getting Leo's disability checks and doing everything else. They're thinking short term rather than long term. That's a horrible plan. Last time we saw them, they were in his car making sweet, sweet love on the front seat. And Shelley's like, well, I'm not going to say anything. He's still my husband, blah, blah, blah. And they seem genuinely concerned about her well-being rather than good cop, bad cop, or whatever. But what I like that happens here is Cooper doesn't buy any of this crap. He says, okay, sure, thanks, leave. Maybe he'll wake up one day with good stuff like that, and just closes the door on her. And I'm like, yeah, Cooper, that's it. Just grind the screw in her a little bit, because he knows where this is going. He can see it, but there's nothing he can do. So he doesn't waste time getting belligerent with her or yelling at her or trying to convince her one way or the other. He just says, you know what, this is what's going to happen. So go. And Shelley looks like, oh, I messed up somehow. So Shelley's not proving to be particularly intelligent either, in my opinion. And he even says, hell, insurance scam, whatever. But the thing with that is I just go, again, with the editing, I'm like, they go right next to the scene where it's a continuation of the One-Armed Man, where he went into the men's room. He's by himself. He's looking to take some medicine, but he's seizing up. He's having a panic attack or whatever. But he starts like, and he doesn't seem to get the medicine from what I remember seeing. But he starts talking to Bob, says, hey, I'm coming for you now. And it's like, okay, he dropped this needle on the floor, and then we cut away from it. But it's a pretty intense scene, even though it's not very long. So I just wondered if we saw him, all this is one whole scene, it would have a bit more staying power rather than cutting up between that and Shelley. Yeah, so before we go on with Cooper, what do you think? Yeah, okay.
But there's something to be said about that last scene. We don't actually see him calm down. We are panned up. We see him from above the stall as he's shaking. He's trying to inject himself.
Yep.
But then we slowly go to the door, and suddenly it stops. He slowly opens the stall door, and that's when he steps out, and he's calling out to Bob and says that he's going after him. And it's like something took him over.
Yeah. His voice is a little more demonic.
Oh, yeah. Then we get an interaction that I guess I should have expected, but we return to the lodge. Finally, we've left the sheriff's department, if I remember correctly, for the day, but that's besides the point. The Asian man from the last couple episodes is watching. Who could it be? Oh, but it's Coop. Dale goes up to Ben and says that Audrey called last night, and she mentioned about seeing him in his tux, and that was the night he got shot. Dale keeps things very professional as he's speaking to Ben, but Ben's going like, oh, how close are you getting with my daughter? Dale says something about, well, we've...
yeah, I think he folds a little here. Yeah, I think he pains a little.
Yeah, he says that we've become acquaintances.
Yeah.
Acquaintances, yes. I just want to make sure I had the right word. He says to Dale, you should be very careful. The men in Audrey's life often fall into her trap, and my advice to you is to steer clear. And Dale then he starts apologizing to him. If you think I made anything too personal, I'm sorry. That's not what I meant at all. And then he departs from Ben. And as he's walking, the Asian man follows.
Yep. Ooh, what's going to happen? I don't know, because we still haven't seen anything at all. But yeah, we know that there's stuff that's going to be going on with that, and with Catherine Martell maybe, and of course Josie Packard. But the thing about this scene, I got to stop and say, I got to give Ben some props. We know he's a bastard. We know he's the man, the evil guy, the boss level dude here in Twin Peaks, or so it seems, with a really, really good number 2 man in Hank. Not even Leo, who originally seems like he was the real bastard. But to me, he's not taking any crap from Cooper. He's letting him know, and he does it in such a controlled manner that you believe what he's saying, that he's like, hey, no, I got the goods. I run this town, bro. That's just how he comes across, and he did it in a charming enough business, professional manner. I'm like, okay, Ben, I'm buying a little bit about what you're selling, at least so far. But the next scene is where we get like another character introduced. So we talked about how Jacques was involved in partying with Laura the night she died at the cabin. And of course, he got shot and then he got snuffed out. But this is his brother coming to do a little collecting, and his name's
Jean.
Jean. That's what I'm going to say it French, not Jean, but Jean. And he's got a great little Cage accent, and he's feeding Audrey the caramels. They're doping her up, getting ready, I think, to whack her, use her as leverage. If they need to, they'll whack her. But he basically says, hey, I'm coming in with the plan. He brings a girl with him, too, who's kind of cute, and they're talking with Blackie, and then Audrey's boss at the perfume store, who, again, originally I said he seemed like he came across as an okay person at first. That first time I said it, and I've been completely wrong since, because he's arguing with Blackie about what's going on. But they noticed, looking at some security footage of Cooper in there, and he's like, oh, he's FBI. He knows him. But Jean is like, hey, not a problem. I take care of this. I take care of all that. Boom, 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 boom. So he's like the cleaner, and he's getting ready to do it. And Blackie in some scenes looks really old and haggardly. In other ones, she looks really, really hot. So I don't know what the deal is with that, but doesn't matter. She does a really good job.
This one, she has her sister there to compare. So
sister ain't bad either. Yeah.
Hey. No, well, I can't deny it. But like I said, that's what the third character introduced in this episode, and I'd have to look over my notes again. But I think there is one more, but I could be wrong. Probably wrong.
Well, the next scene is we get a little bit more old Twin Piggish, where they don't fawn over their coffee and donuts, but Cooper and Harry are there together, and there's the quick little plot, exposition about how Josie called saying she'll be back next in a couple days or whatever it is. But of course, Harry wants to see her alone first, and Cooper kind of yields, which I think he's showing bad instincts here. Cooper's not flawless. He's good, but he lets his relationship sometimes interfere with his judgment. I think this is one case where he doesn't see anything wrong with Josie, but even though he knows there's an insurance scam, we're thinking, and we know as viewers, it's probably about the mill as opposed to what's going with Shelley and Bobby, but we know that is too. So again, Cooper's not perfect for anything, but this is just a data dump where Hawk talks about how he got some information about this house that Leland had talked about, but then they asked if they had seen Gerard, the one-armed guy from the bathroom. They're like, no, but then they go look for him. They find his needle, and it's like the third clue that the giant gave Cooper without chemicals. He points. He says, we need to find this guy. So to me, not much going on in this scene. If you got any comments on that one, obviously go ahead, and then take us into the Nadine scene.
I think we need to go to Nadine. She's strapped up, and Ed's there asking, is this really necessary? And the doctor's saying how, well, she broke through her other ones last night, so yes, absolutely. And she's like chained to that bed.
Super strength returns.
Yes. The doc wants her to calm down, and so he suggests to Ed, you should sing her a song, and Ed's like, okay, all right, I'll sing, but close the door. And he's talking to the kind of restless, resting Nadine right there, and he sings on top of Smokey. And he's holding her hand. And suddenly, she starts gripping it. And her arms start shaking as she's, like, sitting up. And she tears the chains off of the bed.
Yeah.
Ed's freaked out. You can see it. And she's going on about cheerleading tryouts. And she says, you know what they say? You're only 18 once. And you could just tell how bothered by all this, understandably, Ed is right there as he's watching his wife. Oh, it could have been easier if the pills had done their job. That's a horrible thing to say.
But here's the thing, they do have a relationship going back to high school, and they spent some time talking about it, so we understand the position they're both in. And again, she pivoted too from being kind of at first glance to like now where you're like, uh-oh. And is she just delirious from the drugs that she woke up? She obviously doesn't seem to have any shame or guilt about attempted the attempt of taking her own life, trying to avoid the S word there for the censors.
Yes.
But I'm like, okay, we'll see what's going on, because you take something as serious and dramatic as that, you compare it to the next scene where they go into Jacoby's room. And again, if you're not seeing a little bit of each person each episode, you almost forget about it, because you get Dr. Jacoby and his outfit here. He's got all this crazy Hawaiian stuff going on. He's got the lays everywhere. He's got this cute woman in there rubbing his feet. And I think he makes the comment about it being his wife, maybe from the island or something. So I'm like, wait a minute, you got a wife over there, but you live here or something. I don't really get what's going on. And then they start talking about love filling the air and stuff, and it just was kind of like, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, no, he says about how that's his wife, that she lives on the island. But I don't understand why on Earth he would be in a small town like Twin Peaks if he's got a whole nother life there in Hawaii. That's when Dale and Harry, their purpose there is kind of realized, as Dale's saying, "Are you ready to be hypnotized?"
Yeah.
It's actually funny as Dale's reading the trigger. What's it called?
Jacoby had his own ones, because he says, "Oh, I've done this before lots of times. Here you go. Here's what will help." And it's weird stuff, so it's kind of silly until he starts giving the image.
That's right. Yeah, but as he's reading it, did you notice that Harry started dozing off, and Dale has to stop and say, "Harry," because he was almost under the spell too. But Jacoby starts going on about how Tate will come up and seeing the pretty much murder of Jacques, and it leaves off saying, with Jacoby saying he knows who was holding the pillow that was used to, well, suffocate him. And it then cuts away. Is there anything you want to say about these scenes, or have we said all there is to say?
Well, again, it kind of goes from, kind of goofy to a little serious at the end, because it transitions into, to me, one of the best single shots of this episode. And that's where we're going outside. We get that great atonal music, one or two notes that floats around in the background when things are dark. It's you see a shot of an owl, and I just love these little nature scenes like it. It's zoomed in, it's close, you just see him, he's just looking around, but it's at night, and we're looking at Laura's grave, and Audrey's there, and she's just basically, trying to have a conversation with her. And of course, she's speaking out loud, saying, we kind of, James and I hooked up. I don't know if maybe you and this guy Harold were there, but I love him. And she's just going on and talking, and she's got her concerns and stuff. And like I said before, it's a situation where before I was kind of cold on her, just like she's just sort of there, but she's there to put the Mr. Smith's plant there, the orchid, the hybrid orchid, as it were. I like this scene a lot. For some reason, it's just got that nice little tone, and I think the music helps a lot. But unfortunately, it goes back to James and Maddie kind of have a conversation, and he's bitching and complaining and whining about hating his mom and, this and that. Of course, Maddie puts the full lip salute on him, to comfort him and make him feel good. And he acts like he doesn't know what's going on, and because he's such a damn sad second. Of course, Audrey comes in, sees them embracing, and she's all hurt about it, even though she loves him, and she drives off. And he's out there being a punk, complaining. I mean, just choke on it already and die. He's the one that should have taken the pills. But we do get a great transition shot after that of your very favorite scene of yours. We get that transition scene of the light and at dark, which you commented on before too. So let me stop here before we finish this up. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I want to talk about the scene you said you really liked. Yeah, it is I think it's a necessary scene for Donna, because she's talking to Laura, and saying how she kind of wanted to be like her. But all of Laura's problems are plaguing them. Somehow she's still gone, but her problems didn't go anywhere. And I can't disagree. It does seem that way. And you really feel for her in that moment. Then, just following that, walking in to see that James and Maddie they are up to shit. And then when Donna rushes off, yes, I am on the team against James now. I will gladly support Scummy Bobby over there over this guy.
That's not even close.
Just as
that's not even close.
Yeah, no. As he's standing in the
street. After they show the No, I was just gonna say. Well, to your point, he's standing there going, "Why?" and he's acting all butthurt. Like,
no,
you're acting like a punk. You're making good money being on the Bookhouse Boys. Yeah, what's the problem? And then you get your streetlight transition, which is also kind of eerie, like I say you mentioned, and then of course you get Maddie kind of actually breaking her pretty reserved character here, getting upset or whatever, talking with her father, going, "Oh, I hate how people think I'm like Laura,"
Well, yeah, with Uncle Leland. But as Leland's there and he's talking to her and trying to comfort her, Dale and Harry enter the house.
Well, go ahead with this final scene.
Yeah, well, that well, it's actually two different scenes because we have to follow each character where it's led. Dale and Harry, they're standing there in the doorway saying, "Sorry, the door's open." But they explain they're there to arrest Leland for the murder of
scene. You're roboting there a little bit.
Oh, sorry. I was just explaining how Leland he's arrested by Dale and Harry. As for the final scene, Donna goes to Harold Smith.
Testing.
Yes, I'm here.
It looks like we have some technical snafus where I can't hear Professor Pixel. Looks like Bobby got to him somehow through Bob. I'm not sure exactly what happened there, but yeah, the final scene that we were talking about obviously is where Maddie gets upset, and she's complaining to her father about, There you go. Now I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Like I said, Dale, Harry arrested Leland, and we get Donna going to Harold Smith. Harold Smith goes on about
to finish Laura's... up. Go ahead.
Goes
Thank you, Stream. Go ahead.
Yeah, Stream. Donna is with Harold Smith, and Harold says, "Let me get you something to drink." And then, as he's gone, Donna is looking around, and she sees the table. She sees a knife, and it's on this book, probably about orchids. And she notices this, journal, this notebook. She flips open the cover, and she reads the word, "The Diary of Laura Palmer." And that's where we get the end.
Yeah, really good episode. You have different people writing these episodes and different people directing at this point. It's not automatically Frost and Lynch writing every episode and directing it. So there's going to be, I think, some through the season here. May be more like the original, some may not. And this to me is not, I don't think it's a bad episode. I think it's a decent episode. We do get some more characters in here. We see the plot lines advance. But I will still say this, after all these episodes, I still like the feeling of it's basically Cooper and Truman. And yes, right now they're getting a little bit of help from Albert and maybe Hawk, maybe even Andy. But I like how it's them against the entire world of Twin Peaks, because if you think about it, we're only getting to see them, you know, if there's 10 characters, we're only seeing them 1/10 of the time. They're not dominating the screen. We're getting to see 8 or 9 other different story arcs go on, and we're seeing how things change and pivot. And of course, Cooper's arc is basically just there to kind of allow us to progress one day at a time. I think it's a really great formula. I think it's pretty interesting because it allows us to focus on some of these minute details and whether or not it matters, or the sayings or the expressions. Why the hell do we see that stupid street light several times now? I don't know, but it seems pretty kind of cool. Why the hell do we see an owl or a bird? Hell if I know, but I know owls are mentioned a lot. Okay, let's throw in an owl. Maybe I'm getting trolled by Lynch. I don't care. I thought it was a really good looking scene. Now all of a sudden I kind of like Dawn a little bit because she's got that Nancy Drew in her where she's really trying to figure things out. So to me, another successful episode. What say you?
Yeah, no, I agree. It has a lot of things that we do care about. We don't care really about the whole Maddie and James situation. They're just annoying at this point.
We just want them to die.
Well, I don't feel that way about Maddie more than if James was gone, all the problems would be solved.
Well, him, that's what I mean, yeah.
But it is another solid episode of Twin Peaks. And it does leave you wanting with more, or wanting for more.
Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, it's a great episode. There's a lot of, like I say, internet activity about it. There's a lot of people are really crazy with the dates. I'm starting to see in my Twitter feeds. So I've been appreciating seeing what people are doing with this too. But yeah, next week it'll be episode 4 of Twin Peaks season 2. So for Professor Pixel, thanks for showing up again tonight and taking care of this with me. I really enjoyed it. We apologize for that one little snafu there about a minute in towards the end there about the ending. StreamYard, it happens. You guys know that. But yeah, look forward to episode 4, 5, and the rest of them as we continue on our journey. Not necessarily through an invitation but love, but as I would like to say to Pixel and all the fans out there of the Xtreme Movie Show, for you. Have a good night, everybody. Stay extreme.